Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi here with 9 News legal expert Whitney Trelli. You've probably heard former President Donald Trump facing all sorts of legal issues, but the one of note is in New York State, a Manhattan grand jury could decide to indict Donald Trump as soon as this week, according to numerous reports. This is because of the 2016 hush money payment that Donald Trump allegedly made to porn star Stormy Daniels to keep his affair quiet. You probably got a lot of questions about this at home. We're going to try and answer those for you. So again, we've got Whitney Trailer here to try and answer a lot of those for us. Whitney, hopefully I've explained it well there. Again, this hush money payment in the lead up to the 2016 election that Trump made to porn star Stormy Daniels about the alleged affair. Is that the basic of the case? Is that the general overview?
Yeah, that's the basis of the case. And this one, it's interesting because of all the cases that Donald Trump and the Trump organization is tied up in. This one isn't necessarily the legally the strongest or certainly the most egregious. This one, but as you stated, this was a payment that was made to this allegedly made to this adult porn star
to cover up an affair, right?
Right, exactly, and to essentially buy her silence as they were approaching the 2016 election. The issue, though, is that within the Trump organization, they classified this payment as legal expenses. So they misclassified it, and that's falsifying business records. And then there's a question if how that was translated into the campaign and if it was also listed in some way in the campaign as a campaign contribution, which could increase the penalty. So right now what they're looking at is really a misdemeanor, unless they can prove there was sort of a second crime tied to it related to the campaign contribution, which would bump it up to a low-level felony. But either way, I guess the punishment, if you will, is not that severe. These allegations, what they're looking at here, are not as serious as some of the other claims he's dealing with in other states.
So, okay, to be clear, the issue is how it was labeled. It's because, again, to me, maybe the big question that a lot of you might have is, yes, morally, assuming this is true, it's not morally a great thing to pay off a porn star
Yes.
about an alleged affair, assuming, again, it's true. But how is that illegal? And the way you're saying it's illegal is how it was classified within the Trump organization, right? It was classified as a legal expense as opposed to what it actually was.
Right, a payoff or a settlement payment or something else. And so, yes, that is falsifying business records. And it was a payment actually to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, and they were listing that as these legal expenses. And then the question is, again, was it related to the campaign and campaign contributions and how they dealt with it in the bookkeeping, which we don't know. So this is what the grand jury, there's 23 members of the grand jury in Manhattan, and they've been listening to witnesses and looking at documents and things like that. So we don't know, and even if he is ultimately indicted, we probably won't know the specifics until if there's an arrest and things move forward from there.
Before we get into the details about how this might look, to me, again, it doesn't sound like, frankly, that big of a deal. You consider the fact that Trump is currently under investigation pretty strongly in the state of Georgia for perhaps overturning the election or making very, very serious attempts to overturn the election. Here it's a misclassification on a legal transaction. To me, again, I'm not trying to opine too much, but maybe it's a question a lot of folks out there might have, is it doesn't sound like that big of a deal out there. How serious is this? I mean, again, you might know a bit more.
Well, it's a misdemeanor, so it's, and a misdemeanor is punishable for a year or less, whereas a felony is more than a year in the punishment. And so, no, as I've looked at these various cases, I think this is one of the weaker cases against him. And I say that just because this is somewhat attenuated. He's not doing the bookkeeping, he's not doing the accounting. Did he direct it? Did he know about it? Those are all questions that will certainly come out through, and maybe has already come out to the grand jury, which is why they may indict. And you could talk to a lot of prosecutors, and I remember when I first started practicing, and I was talking to a city attorney who was charging someone for stealing a candy bar or stealing some candy at the airport. And I said, you're going to go through all the effort of a jury trial. And their position was, well, they violated the law. And so, yes, I'm going to follow my duty as a prosecuting attorney. And so I think Alvin Bragg, the DA in this case, can say there was a crime committed. I'm going to do my job and prosecute the crime. You know, some people would say this is a city, all the complications with, sorry, I dropped my mic.
Oh, we need that. So hang with us. Yeah, we'll get that back on. But we need the microphone. We want to hear what you're actually saying here.
What I'm saying, yes. Some people may not want to.
Good point.
But you know, his position is a crime has been committed, and I'm going after this person. And obviously, it feels political. And I think the weaker the case is, the more you can make the argument that it is political. And there's some of these cases, what they're doing with the January 6th committee, what happened in Georgia with the attempt to, you know, potentially find votes. Those
classified
cases,
documents too. I mean,
the classified documents is an issue, but that could even have a political spin, saying, "Well, you didn't have to have a raid and an FBI raid and things like that." But the response is, "Well, they were trying to work with him and they just weren't cooperating." So, and there were concerns over the national security of these documents. So there's arguments about it, and it's also interesting and was kind of pushed under the rug that the Trump organization has already been found guilty on some tax issues and was fined $1.6 million just a few months ago. And so there is legitimate claims against former President Trump and the organization. This one, I mean, are the elements of a crime there? Yes. Is this the strongest claim? No, not by any stretch, in my opinion. And I'm actually a little surprised this is the one they came out with first. Because remember, we were talking about the case in Georgia, and we thought the grand jury there might indict. And there have been some, but not against former President Trump yet.
Well, let's get, I guess, to this case a bit more specifically, because Donald Trump himself saying on Saturday on social media that he anticipates being arrested this week. He said Tuesday. It's now, we're recording this Wednesday morning, to be clear, so things may change. Wednesday morning, March 22nd. And that Trump said that he was thinking he was going to be arrested on Tuesday, March 21st. That didn't happen. Why does he think, and why is it so apparent? What sort of legal things are we seeing here that makes it clear that an indictment seems to be coming?
Well, that's been all the hints from the DA, and we just don't know what the grand jury is going to do. And so,
what are those hints that we're getting?
Well, there's just been comment, and the New York police is working with the Secret Service, and so there's suggestion that there may be an indictment. Now, the grand jury meets on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and so this is also based on some of the witnesses that have been called in. And so we know today there was at least one or two more witnesses that they wanted to hear. So if there is an indictment, I could see it coming either this afternoon on Wednesday, the 22nd, or Thursday when they meet again. And so they are expecting it. I think President Trump, of course, the reason this is a situation, I don't think the former president presents a flight risk, especially being a candidate in 2024. So the authorities are essentially all working together to see how they're going to facilitate this. So that's why there was discussion about Mr. Trump going from Florida to New York, to the DA's office to essentially turn himself in and be booked, literally fingerprint, photographed. And I doubt he would be in a cell per se, because he'd have Secret Service with him. So he'd probably be in sort of a holding or an interview room, that kind of thing. So it's going to be unprecedented without question.
And to this would be the first time that a former president is indicted, correct?
Well, yes, in modern times. I did find after some deep digging that Ulysses S. Grant in 1872 was arrested or charged with speeding his horse-drawn carriage. And the officer that arrested him the first time, he went through and he was speeding, and the officer said, "Oh, I didn't realize it was you, Mr. President." Well, the next day when he came back at speeding, the officer said, "No, I got to take you in," and he booked him, and I think he paid $20 for his bail. So that was, so it hasn't happened in modern times. This will be, if there is actually a charge and a sentence, how would he serve that sentence? I mean, there's just so many questions and complications on how this would move forward.
Is there any chance there is no indictment here?
There is a chance. There is a chance. It's all looking like there is going to be, and that's the behind the scenes conversations between everybody as they facilitate it. But yeah, it's certainly possible that they come back and recommend no charges. Okay,
so let's say they do go ahead with the indictment, as we are all expecting at this point. Next step, you said that there's the fingerprints. There'd be some really dramatic images, I would imagine, and
yes.
To your point, some pretty politically damaging ones, you would think, perhaps. Or, again, a former president being arrested is not something that happens every day, and there would be those, perhaps handcuffs, fingerprints, all that sort of stuff. What happens after that?
Right. So then they would have probably the arraignment, which would be probably a week later, where he would have an opportunity to, declare guilty or not guilty. Right. And then, I mean, one thing about President Trump, he has been tied up in litigation his entire adult career. And he is, lots of experts, lots of people who have dealt with him have said he's the master manipulator. He's able to delay things, divert, all these other things. So this actual case could go on for some time. I mean, he's going to have top-notch lawyers, unlimited resources. This could be a legal battle royale, if you will. So it would, I could just see just very complicated litigation going forward.
Okay, so maybe let's broaden this on out. I think I think we all can kind of see where this is going, where it gets politicized. Maybe Trump calls Albert Bragg this a politically motivated thing, and maybe to a degree, a misdemeanor and something that appears to be maybe just a transactional note. To your point, maybe this is not the strongest of the cases out there, but you kind of broaden the perspective, and you see the Georgia case that appears also headed for an indictment, and then the classified documents and the January 6th investigations. How much overall legal limbo is the former president in right now? In which case do you think at this point appears to have the highest chance of conviction?
Well, he's been in legal trouble for some time. And I think with this particular one, I think it's emboldening him because he's obviously been able to capitalize it in fundraising. The folks who are coming out to defend him, Lindsey Graham and others, are saying, well, this is the best thing for him because it looks like a political witch hunt. And so, and again, I think the other charges are more serious. And the question is, okay, right now, this may not have the political impact, but I think, so legally, will he still be able to run for office if he is indicted, arrested, charged, convicted? And the answer is yes. The limitations for running for office are you have to be 35 years of age, a natural-born citizen, have lived, who's lived in the country for at least 14 years. Those are essentially the issues. And so, is he a good enough politician to use these types of indictments and criminal activity to his benefit? For sure. But at some point, I think particularly with Republican candidates, they're going to say, look, we don't want a criminal in, even if they feel like it was politically motivated. I think at some point that will catch up with him politically. But legally, I mean, he's going to be in litigation for years and years, and partly it's because he just complicates it. He makes the litigation difficult because he's got the resources and the experience, really.
Well, interesting from a broad perspective. Any final thoughts on this case?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know how much the prosecutors are working together across the country because there's so many complications and nuances here that there has to be some coordination on a lot of levels, both with President Trump, but I think even with the various indictments and where things are. And so, this one I'm surprised they came out with first, because this just allows you to then taint everything else going forward, saying this is just another one of their political witch hunts. So I'm a bit surprised, but we're going to see a lot of this over the next 4 or 5 years, and could it impact the outcome of the election? Certainly from a political perspective, but I don't think from a legal perspective there's gonna be any barrier that he's gonna face.
All right, well, I guess we'll find out in the next few days, weeks, months, years ahead, and we'll have you all the way through. So,
Okay.
9 News legal expert Whitney Trailer, thanks so much for joining us and enlightening us on this complicated situation, so thank you.
Sure thing, good to be here.